everybody, in today's video I'm going to talk to you about the pros and cons of living in a resort town. And when I say resort town, I'm talking about a town whose existence is primarily based on tourism, a town where you have far more tourists than you have permanent residents. And I'm talking about this from my own experience because I live in Sedona, Arizona. Sedona, we have about 10,000 residents, but every year we get 2 to 4 million tourists. And I have friends who live in other resort towns like Breckenridge and Vail, friend in Maui, for instance, and some of the places like Maui, Vail, Lake Tahoe, some of the California coastal towns and the Florida coastal towns. I've talked to them, and some of these pros and cons are about the same for all of the resort towns. So if you're ever curious about moving to a resort town, stay tuned because I'm going to tell you all about the pros and cons of living in a resort town. So let's start off with the very first benefit, and that is you are surrounded by beautiful natural scenery. So I, for instance, in Sedona can just look out my window and see the red rocks, or I can sit on the patio with my friends and we could see some of the Sedona landmarks like Cathedral Rock or Bell Rock, or not, you can't see Cathedral Rock from my house, but some of my friends' homes you can see Cathedral Rock. You can see Courthouse Butte from my house. So it's nice to have that beautiful scenery to give you that little tranquil feeling. And if you live in another resort town like Lake Tahoe or Flagstaff, for instance, you have, the ski resort, beautiful pine trees. And of course, if you're at the beach community, you could look out and see the ocean, and you don't even have to go very far if you don't have a view from your home. So having beautiful scenery just either from your house or when you're taking a walk or when you take a trip to the grocery store, that is one of the greatest benefits of living in a resort town. Number two is there are always tons of things to do. It's lots of fun. You don't always get bored because if you're at your house and suddenly you have nothing to do, there are usually a lot of activities like shopping, restaurants, galleries, tours. A lot of these tours, like in Sedona, say they have these vortex tours or scenic tours where you could drive around. So you could, with very short notice, if you're bored, find something to do. There's also other stuff that are coordinated activities like going hiking or going on a helicopter ride. If you're in Flagstaff or Tahoe, for instance, you could go skiing. Same thing if you're in the Colorado towns. In Sedona, you could go to the creek and just kind of put your feet in the water and have a picnic during the day, or go to Slide Rock State Park. If you're in Flagstaff, you can go skiing at Snowball. So lots of things, lots of activities, lots of outdoor activities too. If you're an outdoor person, lots of outdoor activities and lots of stuff that you could do on relatively short notice. The other thing is in a place like Sedona where I live, it's kind of a spiritual center, like one of the most spiritual oriented communities in the world, and you could always do these types of spiritual things that you can find in other communities. Like you could go book a reading with just about anybody. You could see a psychic, you could see a medium, you could see a tarot reader, tea reader, palm reader, or you could do cord cutting stuff, like very specialized things here in Sedona. Crystal shops are everywhere. That's why I've got rocks all over the place. But all sorts of stuff that are not only activities for the outdoors, but that are also unique to the community that you're living in. Okay, number three is you're going to be living in a town that has a huge tourist industry. So if you are an entrepreneur and you're thinking of starting a business that caters to tourists, this would be a good opportunity for you to live in one of these towns. Now, I know here in Sedona, for instance, there are tons of opportunities for artists that might want to open a gallery, or I actually have thought about maybe buying a nice van and creating a tour business on the side. I was hoping to, entice my kids to come move here and become tour guides in my new tour industry, which didn't work out, but I mean, that's the type of things that I'm talking about because there's tons of tourists here, and when they're here, they're on vacation and they're ready to spend. So if you're an entrepreneur and you're thinking about a tourist type of a business, going to a tourist town could be a great place to open a new business. Okay, number four is typically tourist towns are welcoming communities because they like people to come and move into the neighborhood and become part of the community rather than have another home go up for sale and become an Airbnb short-term rental property. So the residents typically are happy when people move in and you could be welcomed into the community. And then again, people will begin to know you're local when you go to like the same grocery store all the time or the same shopping all the time. You get to talking to people and you're like, oh yeah, I just lived here, or I just moved down the block, and you get to meet people that way because the communities are often welcoming to new residents that live in the community, or even if it's your vacation home and you're living half the year and somewhere else half the year, the residents like people moving in that are residents and not short-term rentals. So you could be welcomed into the community. Not every place, but it seems like in general that is the case, that the residents are welcoming to people moving in and living in the community rather than a home on the block going to a short-term rental. Okay, and number 5, this doesn't work for everybody, but I live alone, but I like to get my kids and my friends and my family to visit. So when you live in a beautiful tourist community, it's easier to say, hey, can you come stay with me for the weekend? We'll go do this. Or my kids are often like, hey, come for the weekend, we'll go to Slide Rock. Or come for the weekend, we'll just go hang out in the creek. Or when my daughter comes, it's like, come for the weekend and we'll go hiking in the beautiful Red Rock Trail. So sometimes it's easier to entice your friends and your kids mostly, right? It's hard when you're adults and your kids are adults to get them to come stay for the weekend. But if you're in a beautiful tourist destination, now it's sometimes easier to get your friends to come up for the weekend. But on the flip side, if you're in a place like Hawaii, I have friends who live in Hawaii and they say they have a hard time getting their family to come visit because it's so expensive and it's so difficult to get there. But in a place like Sedona, say, or Flagstaff, or maybe even Lake Tahoe, some of the beach towns on the coast, it might be easier to get your kids to come visit, saying, hey, look, let's go to the beach this weekend, or let's go skiing this weekend, come up and see your mom, So again, that you're in an attractive community might be easier to get your friends to come visit you. Okay, so now let's go to the flip side, the cons. Probably the biggest con, absolutely the biggest con, is the cost of living is going to be much higher. Now, we're probably going to start with the cost of living of your home. So, for instance, here where I live in Sedona, the median home price is above $1 million. So probably 1.1, 1.2. I didn't check out to see exactly what it was today, but the median home price in Sedona, $1.1, $1.2 million. So it's hard to buy a home. But if you would go to some of the neighboring towns, maybe just 30 minutes away, homes could be 30, 35% less. And same thing if you would go to Phoenix, homes 35% less. So again, the cost of living in the resort towns are going to be high. And often it's going to be the same with everything. Like for instance, the groceries in Sedona are so expensive. Oddly enough, gas is not that expensive, but groceries, anything that you want to have repaired. My lawn service costs twice here in Sedona than it did when I lived in Phoenix. So things like that, your cost of living is going to be much higher. So if you're not able to do it financially, that might rule it out completely, just the cost of living being so high. Okay, number 2 thing against living in a resort community is that you're going to have a very seasonal economy. So if you're a business owner, for instance, relying on the tourism that we had talked about earlier, and you're in a place like Sedona, we kind of have a little bit of a reversed market, where here in Sedona, the summer is actually a low season, as is like December and January. So during those months, your business is going to be lower, and it will be difficult for you to get by if you're counting on revenue from the tourist industry because it's so seasonal. On the other hand, when the tourists are not here, it's a good time to live because you can go anywhere and not have a lot of traffic. And that's the other thing, is it's so seasonal that you have to plan your day according to the traffic. So that could be a pro, a con. If I want to go to West Sedona, say, if I'm going in the summertime, I can get there in 20 minutes, but if I'm going in the wintertime, it's 45. Which brings me to my con number 3, of course, which is the traffic in the heavy season and the crowd. So in Sedona, it can take me 2-3 times longer to get to the far side of town if it's, say, October, or if it's March or April, because the traffic just backs up for a long way. And it's the same thing if you want to get into a restaurant, or if you want to go shopping, or if you want to go see the galleries during the high season. It's just so crowded. Most of the locals just kind of stay indoors, or if they want to go somewhere in the high season, they go very early or maybe very late to kind of plan their day around it. I know sometimes it's hard for me if I'm meeting a client on the far side of town. I don't know what time to leave because it's like, will the traffic be extra bad? So usually I'll leave if it's high season and I'm going onto the Red Rock Loop, say, I'll leave 45 minutes to an hour earlier. And if it just happens to be a glitch where it's not that crowded, then I'm like at my destination a half hour early and I'm finding things to do, which there are always things to do. But again, I want you to understand that, of course, traffic and crowds is a big con when it comes to living in a tourist town. So number 4 actually can be very disturbing. When you're in a tourist town like this, you have a hard time for people getting help in the restaurants. So many restaurants have closed because people can't afford to live here. Now, there are a lot of people that just live in the surrounding towns like Rimrock or Cornville or Cottonwood, and they commute every day to Sedona to work. Now, when gas doubled and tripled recently, that made it tough, and some of the people weren't able to do it. But there's been a recent article that happened in Sedona here where they decided to make one of the parking lots a public parking lot for the local employees to be able to sleep in their car overnight and go to work. Now that's really disturbing. You're going to a restaurant and thinking that poor waitress might have to sleep in her car because she can't afford to have a rental here in Sedona. And Sedona, and I know all of the resort towns, this is what's happening, is the reason prices have gone up for long-term rent is investors have come in and bought homes, then turned them into short-term rentals. Now these used to be long-term rentals that people could rent and, work in Sedona or work in the tourist town. But because the demand for the short-term rentals went up and many of the homes that were long-term rentals are now short-term rentals, the price for rent is super high and people can't afford to rent a place where they work. And so a lot of people are sleeping in their cars. So that's a very sad, a very dark part of living in a tourist town, is knowing that some of the people that you interact with during the day may not be able to live here, so they're either sleeping in their car in a parking lot that they've designated for local workers, or they're driving 45 minutes to get to their job. So that is a sad side note of what's happened in a lot, not just Sedona. I'm thinking every tourist town in the country is going through this, and I know some of them are even worse than here in Sedona. I think I heard Vail, it's almost impossible to get people to work. And I do see restaurants closing all the time, or we can only be open 3 days a week because we can't get help. And that's really sad when you see that happening. Okay, number 5. I have encountered this with some people that I know, is they move to a tourist town and they get kind of lonely because it's harder to meet people unless you are the type that for me, this is not a problem. I actually have more friends since I moved to Sedona than I did before because I know people from work, so if you come here and you have a job, then you interact with people. But if you're thinking, oh, I'm going to meet my neighbors and stuff, a lot of times the people right next to you are seasonal. So actually on almost 3 sides of mine, I have people that are here, they come for a month and then they go home for 3 months, and then they come for a week and they go home. So it's harder to make friends with people who live right next to you. But if you're the type that likes to join a club, I know there are hiking clubs here. A lot of people go to those hiking clubs. If you go to a church or if you go to a lot of the classes, you'll meet people that way. But I have heard people that come to Sedona where I live, or live in Flagstaff, which is the next kind of tourist town. They do get a little bit lonely if they're moving here by themselves. Now, if they're coming with a spouse or the family, it doesn't seem to be as extreme. But if you're more of an introvert like me, you might be a little bit lonely coming into one of these towns because everyone you're meeting is a tourist. So just keep that in mind. Of course, there are plenty of ways to meet people because there are hiking clubs and cooking, and go to Pilates class, say, for instance, you'll meet people that way. But some people have complained that they've been lonely, and eventually 3 or 4 years later they sell and move away. So that's it. That's my top 10 pros and cons of living in a tourist town. My name is Dawn Dickinson, the channel Living in Northern Arizona. Arizona. I post videos every single week, so if you like the video, please do me a favor and give me a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. That helps other people find this type of information when they're looking for it. And also, if you're interested in buying or selling a home in Sedona, Verde Valley, Flagstaff, or Prescott, please feel free to reach out to me. Again, my contact information is always in the description below, and if I can't talk to you right away, I definitely will get back to you. Hope you have a great week and a great Thanksgiving, and I will see you back here again next week.